Good morning.
Morning.
Schedule.
Sorry, Paul, I had to kick the recorder back on.
No problem. We have a half-day session at SmartNIC Summit on June 13th from 1 to 5. Boris, are you on? Boris and or? So we're Mark.
Boris is here.
Mark, were you able to? Joe said he was looking to get you and or Boris to the event. Did he get that done before he went on vacation?
No, he's made the request. We have to get all of our travel approval, so that's
Right.
the only thing that's pending.
Okay. Sounds good. The half-day abstract that we have is, I'm going to post it as well into Google Docs. That's the abstract we have so far. At this point, we know what we're going to be talking about. We know that Joe is going to be the moderator. It looks like we're going to have Venkat agreed to tackle use cases, solutions, and requirements. And so we need an abstract there. So Venkat, if you could tackle that, and if you would send me a bio or put your bio in the document I just posted, that would be awesome. We need an API session and a proof of concept session, and it looks like Murcha, you're tagged in here to do that presentation. Is that correct to your understanding? Are you here? Murcha is here.
Yeah, I'm here, but I offered to give some variety into participants, not to be the main speaker for this.
Okay.
So I need
So-
another, let's say another 1-2 people to talk with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Tim, I'd propose you doing that since I know you're going to be there, but join with Murcha to talk about proof of concept projects, and especially with the Nginx firewall piece being done by then. So we're hoping.
We're open. We'll talk more about that.
Okay. Anyway, folks, on the technical side, take a look at this. If you're someone who can speak and you want to speak on one of these sessions, that would be great. We did decide that the ARM ecosystem session would be taken out as an ARM ecosystem session. They're working to get that done, Mark, right, as a separate session. And
Well,
go ahead.
sorry, Paul, I was just going to clarify. So we put the proposal out there. If it's desirable to have that as a separate SmartNIC session, that's fine. We're okay with that. We just don't want to lose that opportunity to share the work that we're doing with the ecosystem on that program. And a lot of the vendors creating DPU cards are in discussion, going through the process. So I think it's foundational to this this project, and we want to make sure we can share that information so that we can bring visibility to it.
Got it.
But it's not confirmed, right? It's not confirmed yet. That
It's not. No, I haven't seen Lance come back with an answer. I think he wrote them yesterday or the day before.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess, Paul, there was still a question in that email. Do we feel as a group here that it needs to be broken out? Like, I'm not sure that decision has been made. Is there an opportunity to change the messaging to be more inclusive? Maybe by having other members of the project here participate. So the message is not just ARM delivering information on a program. It could be with partners that are also going through the process.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at this point, I don't think that we could do that, right? It hasn't been something that we've been working on in OPI. It's coming, directly from ARM. So it doesn't feel like it's really belongs in the OPI session. I think it's going to be an excellent session on its own in the SmartNIC Summit. This is perfect for that. but if it's going to be part of OPI, it really needs to be something that we're working on in the working groups, discussed in the TSC. It really has only been basically represented in OPI thus far. We haven't, we haven't adopted anything, made any sort of decisions. We haven't done any of that. So I think that presenting it in the OPI session will, for people who don't have the backstory, don't come to, every single meeting, it might just be very confusing.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Dan, and that is true, right? All the work that's been done so far is pre OPI, right? It comes up even in silicon, pre-silicon steps need to follow the program. So okay, that makes sense. So let's hope we can get that into the SmartNIC general sessions then.
Well, I'll see what I can do with Lance to get that taken care of as well. So I'll work with him. And then Tim, if I may, the third one on my list was a really simple one. Boris made a suggestion to me that made sense, that we change the name. We changed the nomenclature subgroups to working groups. And so I've submitted a couple PRs to change that on the website. And just, I don't think that's something we need to vote for, but I just wanted to see if anybody had any strong opinion against that. Just changing the nomenclature from subgroup to working group. I have been, without even thinking about it, posting all of the videos that we post into various working group playlists. And so I named all the playlists working group rather than subgroup. Just a naming thing for you guys. Let me know if there's anybody who feels that's a bad idea.
I'll just throw out, I gave my +1 on them. I was just waiting for a second +1 before merging.
Okay. Thank you. And Stephen, I did see I think you had a comment about removing committee from outreach and making it out just instead of outreach committee work group, but just making outreach work group. That makes sense too. When I have a chance, I'll go back and do that. So merge those and then I'll make that change as well. I may have to go through and find it in several different places.
Great, sounds good.
Does anyone else object to the name change? I'm taking silence as agreement here.
Yeah. All right. I think that's all from me at this point.
Okay, thanks. So the agenda below, I had used number 2. So have we essentially already done that? Paul?
Sorry, Joel. Stepped on your agenda item.
No, that's fine.
No problem. I feel
Okay,
no burning
so-
need to go first.
So what we have left is I had asked Joel Moses to come from the board meeting that was 2 weeks ago. Normally, Joe White would give us that update as he attends that meeting, but since he's been absent, we didn't get an update. So I asked Joel to step in for a few minutes and tell us what happened at the board meeting. And then
Sure,
after that, if we don't have any other items, we'll pivot to the Dash presentation for the rest of the meeting today.
Perfect.
Great. And I will whip through this pretty quickly because one of the major topics of discussion that was at the board meeting was related to Dash. And I see Christina's here. So that's great. That actually advances by a couple of weeks what the board had heard as to how we were going to engage with Dash. So just running down really quickly through the board minutes. The major thing is that ARM was introduced as a premier member, and I see Mark's on here. Mark, on behalf of the board, since you weren't able to attend the board meeting, welcome to the OPI project. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Joel.
Let's see, in the TSC update, some of the major topics of discussion was Dash, which I'm guessing we're going to hear a little bit about here in a moment. There was a question about how to engage, and it was pointed out that several of us were already engaging with the team working on Dash. And so I guess that's why Christina's here today. So thank you for being here. Let's see. Several slide decks were presented at the SNIA meeting, the SIG. And those are being obtained from the program manager and will be posted to the OPI repository. They are related to DPU technologies, and that's from Sridhar. There was a very quick update on the status of the development systems. The LF team is working on getting us onto the next tier of GitHub. We apparently have almost exhausted our use of their lowest level tier, so we are required to go to something more sophisticated. The LF analytics team has worked up some metrics that they can use to produce reports from the GitHub to tell us how we're doing in terms of check-ins and things like that. Those should be available to everybody, including members of the TSC, fairly soon. They have provided an update on the OPI lab. If everything goes well, Hurricane Electric wanted us to use their MSA instead of the LF MSA. So that's under review still at the LF legal team. If everything goes well, they're expecting the engagement and the lab space to be available beginning on May 1st. And commensurate with that, there was a reminder that team members need to be collaborating now on the final hardware list for the lab. And then there was an outreach update, and the meeting was closed after that. So that's the update. Any questions?
Hey, just a few comments, Joel. Thanks. So the first on the GitHub, right? So unless we get confirmation from the maintainers, we will not go for the paid version. So the decision is we should come from the maintainers, Boris and Stephen and others. I think once we get the input, hey, now it's the time we should go for anything paid, then only we will go. Yeah. So and
I remember the discussion had something to do with the relation to use of GitHub Actions.
Yeah. Why it's going for like 90% even by the mid of the month itself, kind of a thing, right? The reason is because of the GitHub Actions. It's consuming our quota, the free quota kind of a thing. That's what we heard. So, but they're trying to optimize it and see if we can like whatever is not required, we don't use those GitHub Actions kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
And the second part, the analytics. Actually, there is a bug in the analytics thing that is stopping. And when Boris and others are following up for last 2 months, and unfortunately, that analytics team hasn't fixed that bug yet. So, and if I collect those metrics, it will not do justice properly for the members here. So that hence it was not shown to the board, and we committed that we get it fixed. Even yesterday we sent a reminder to fix those bugs. Yeah.
Okay.
So these are the two. And for just a quick update on the lab side. So LF Legal has reviewed the thing and given the feedback. Now their legal team is reviewing. So it will go back and forth a few times and before we finalize on it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you, Sridhar. Appreciate it. Tim, back to you.
Do you have any comments on the lab, Venkat, or are we all good there?
No, I think we are good. I think once the legal is done, we can start ordering some equipment. We also updated that we won't have the full lab, and it's good to start with, even a partial lab and slowly build over a period of time. And as and when we get some equipment, we should integrate and keep moving. So that will be the way we would operate.
Okay. So Venkat, do you want to do the introductions for Christina?
Yeah, definitely, right. Thanks, Christina, for being here. I didn't formally prepare, but if anyone who, I know some of us are attending the DASH meeting. So Christina is the main program lead
Oh, thank you, Venkat. So hi, everyone. I think I know a lot of you. I think I've met quite a few of you in the past. So I'm gonna say hi. And my name is Christina. I've been at Microsoft about 23 years. I started as a network engineer a long time ago, router switches, data center and WAN networking. And somehow I've landed in product management now. So now I'm in product management over on the compute side of things, but programmable hardware. My last project was the 400 gig chassis with ZR optics. I delivered those into the data centers in the WAN, and now I'm over here. So a little bit of background about me. So hit me up on LinkedIn if you want to say hi or connect. How much time are we allowing for this? Just so I have some context, Venkat and team.
Well, we're at 7:22 and we go
Okay.
till 8. And
Okay,
we
great.
have nothing
great.
else on the agenda. but
Nothing else to do. We got nothing. Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. That's okay. And I'm not used to this app, so I'm going to give it a try. And can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have to let you know I am not the best PM in the world. I'm not the best presenter. So I don't know if I should be in slideshow mode or not. Is this okay if I just leave it like this?
Yep.
Okay, great. So first slide here, just introduction to Dash. So disaggregated APIs for Sonic hosts. So it's me. I'm the project lead from the PM side. And we used to be Azure Networking, Azure Compute, and Azure Storage. And now we are all lined up into Azure Core. And that's why my name says Azure Core right there. We also have Chris Summers, who's been instrumental helping me in this project. Actually, we're partners with the testing side of things as well as Murchak. And so we've collaborated together to look at performance and conformance testing, looking at the programmable hardware and how we're going to do that in California and in Redmond and at different supplier locations. So that's the introduction slide. And just, I'm not sure the context everyone has, but just taking it back for a minute, about 6 or 7 years ago, Sonic was created. It's software for open networks in the cloud. And what it was championed by Microsoft and put together by Microsoft and partners. And it was the one operating system to put onto networking devices, at Microsoft and Azure, so that we could have one operating system to manage, maintain, upgrade, etc., instead of multiple in our enterprise, because we have so many switches, so many nodes. So, we have T0s, T1s, T2s, so T3s actually, but we don't run Sonic on T3s. And so we really needed to be able to manage that operating system across our worldwide network. We have a different slide here that I'm just going to pull up. We have 65 Azure regions as of a couple of months ago, and over 200 data centers, 175,000 kilometers of fiber, 190,000 network point of presence. We have a lot, and it's hard to manage that many. And so that's one of the reasons we're shifting over to Sonic. So it was developed by Liwa Wan, Gohan Liu, the Sonic team, and the open source community for Sonic. So just a little bit of context there. And it's Debian, it's containerized, and we have it running on the Azure cloud. So any questions there on this slide?
By the way, I think you said you were switching slides. I didn't ever
Yeah,
see
I
it
didn't
switch.
present it, but I'll show it to you.
Oh, okay.
I'll bring it over. I was switching it just so I could get a visual, but this is, you know, basically the scale of our network. It's huge.
Thank you.
And Gerald gave this presentation at HPC. So back. And so I will switch to the next one here. And so I guess what we were trying to say is that, you know, we have Sonic enabled switching, you know, on, you know, tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So we can operate Sonic on fixed form and chassis switching. So that's this here. And the Sonic for chassis is multi-ASIC. So they are developing a methodology to, you know, go across ASICs on the, and I worked on that on the chassis project myself. So now moving 6 years to today, so if you have the one operating system for the switch, and now we have programmable DPUs, IPUs, EPUs, whatever you want to call them, the idea came forth to extend Sonic into Dash, so disaggregated APIs for Sonic hosts, and we created this about, Chris, 1.75 years ago, and we've been meeting, we've had 65 Dash community meetings. We've also split off into a couple of sub work groups, one for high availability and one for behavioral model or BMV2. So we have 3 different meetings per week, community meeting, HA, behavioral model, and we all get together and contribute. Gohan, Prince, and the Sonic team do come together and work on, you know, these Dash extensions. And we did recently migrate to the Linux Foundation, similarly to how we did with the Sonic team. And the idea, and so I have little notes down here. We've been sitting in GitHub for over 1.5 years, etc. We do have a lot of people attending. Sometimes we'll have between 25 and 45 people attending the Wednesday call. Just depends on people's schedule and availability. We'll have NVIDIA, AMD, Pensando, Broadcom, Intel, Dream Big Semiconductor, Marvell, Keysight, you know, on and on and on. I could list all the people that I've gotten to know and work with. So it's been really great. And what we're trying to do from my end is we're just sharing what Azure's scenarios are in the cloud and what we do every day, and trying to share that with the technology suppliers. They can optimize their hardware for those scenarios. And so we go back and forth a lot between the internal engineering teams and the external hardware technology suppliers to come together and deliver like optimized solutions for them to create. So what we're trying to do though is we're trying to achieve 10 to 100 times performance in connections. So connections per second is really the KPI or the metric that we're looking at. And so we're looking to innovate across switch and DPU, IPU. So where we started was with, if you can imagine, an appliance, so like a 48 RU rack with a couple of servers that simply provide power to DPUs with a couple of switches on top. And it's quite expensive, but the roadmap, of course, would be moving toward a smart switch form factor, maybe 3 RU, slotted with DPUs inside of that, where you can perform offload there, and moving forward into, you know, almost any form factor that you want to see. So let me see here. And the DPUs, of course, I guess I should say, we're developing basically an operating system for the DPU or Dash. So any questions here on this slide? And please let me know if I'm talking too much. So the Dash components of, you know, Dash here, I guess I just said this, we have nearly every supplier here, and we are looking to move to the smart switch. We do have our open source community where everyone participates. I guess I already talked about the APIs, and so everyone contributes via the PRs. We do have the P4, and then we have the SCI sections inside of the GitHub, and that's where the contributions come in. And then we also have the test suites, and each contribution, Chris and Merchant team like it to come with a test. So that's important. We are trying to, and I already talked about how it's built upon Sonic and we're extending. And so one interesting piece is the security, because, you know, Sonic is already certified for government work. And so theoretically, because Dash is simply an extra container inside of Sonic up in the user space, it's already certified for government work. So that's another reason that we wanted to have that. And then we're not only Azure, other clouds and enterprise providers could use this. So that was the idea. And here, what we're trying to say on this slide is, you know, normally the traffic comes in, it hits the FPGA and the ASIC, it comes to the host and goes through a software stack, VFPGFT, for, you know, do you belong here, the ACL, and then if you do, yes or no, then we route the packet and route it. And what's happening is we, you know, at 10 and 40 gig, we weren't really experiencing the bottlenecks that we're starting to experience. And so we thought we'd want to go ahead and offload onto hardware to get those millions of connections per second. And so this slide was presented at Ignite. I don't know if y'all went to Ignite this year, but Mark Rasinovich presented this slide. And so we created this where, you know, here is basically the point where we're doing the offload. And so the tunnel is created, and the traffic is basically tunneled to the appliance or smart switch or whatever it is, the form factor we're going to use to go ahead and, you know, determine whether the packet belongs here, where we're going to route it, how we're going to transform the packet according to the scenario, if it's VNet to VNet or service tunnel private link or express route or whatever we come up with in the future. But we started with 7 scenarios defined in the Dash GitHub, and then move on. And, you know, again, we're only really targeting in the Azure fleet, you know, 5% of the fleet that really require these high connections per second. Theoretically, you could put it anywhere, but this is what we're doing right now. So this is the problem we're trying to solve and disaggregate, you know, take the DPU off the host. And it's a VXLAN tunnel.
So Christina, just to clarify, in your use case, the DPUs are being racked into an appliance. They're not actually in the hosts that are running the end workloads.
Right now. So to get a jump start on the technology, I have a coworker named James Grantham. Don't know if you've ever met him, but he is on the appliance project. And so, yeah, there would be he has 48 RU racks with 2 servers slotted with DPUs. And like I said, the 2 switches on top, and these are being sent out to data centers today. And so they're landing in data centers, they get energized, powered on, they go through an automation BSL process, bootstrap language, run through a set of self-tests, etc. I think he's putting 3 per data center, I think. Anyway, yeah, so that's so that they could get started and get going on the project with the eventual goal of moving to a smart switch. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's just a little, I mean, we at OPI, we recognize that appliances like that are being built, but our focus has been more about the DPU being in the server.
I'm not going to say it out loud, but yes, you could do that. I have, you know, my project doesn't want to compete with some other internal projects, but yes, you could do that. You could absolutely put it in a server, a commodity. You know. So, and that's, I guess I could, I have, actually that leads right into my next slide here. If you're at the T0, the T1, the T2, the T3, oh look, this is the dash icon, by the way, this little block with the disaggregation coming out. But yeah, it's in the server of the appliance, it's in a smart TOR, could in a smart switch, could in any tier. That's really what this slide is trying to say. What we're doing, Azure right here, is we're doing the appliance right now, we're doing the smart switch. And, you know, maybe if in the future it's useful, maybe we'll do something else. But that doesn't mean that other enterprises or clouds couldn't do something else. Does that help?
Yeah, I was just pointing out the difference of view between what we typically talk about at OPI versus what you're
Yeah,
discussing.
because, you know, Dash can run on, it's just running on the DPU. You could put the DPU anywhere. So,
Right.
yeah, it's kind of cool. So this is a drawing of, you know, our typical drawings, and I've kind of dumbed it down a lot, but you know, our data center links and things like that. And then in the Dash GitHub repo, here's another version of that drawing. I call it a representative region and data center. And so, you know, of course, down low, here's the server with the VM layer, you know, and here's the WAN up here. And so, you know, traffic comes in through the WAN, comes through the RNGs or gateways. We have our west and our east fiber, and we come in through the WAN equipment that I didn't really designate here because it's not relevant. And it, you know, it crosses the boundary, the metros and things into the data center boundaries. And data center can be one building, it could be 13 buildings, you know, we just call it a data center, but it could be huge. But it comes in across the boundary, and it'll come into the set of tier 2 switches that also go west. And I only put a couple, but it could be 16, there could be 32, there could be 64, there could be 128, you know, but these are our chassis switches, you know, 8 slot, 16 slot switches. And theoretically in the future, you could run, you know, Sonic or Smart Switch on those, but you come down into the tier 1s. And what we're targeting here with the Smart Switch is, you know, originally our idea was to hang the Smart Switch as an appliance off of a tier 1. So, you know, just dangle it off to the side, but we are also going to use it as a tier 1. So you could do that here, or put it on a rack with an appliance, you could put it on a Tor, you could put it on a NIC. So this is in the GitHub if you want to look at it.
Christina, you're talking about here like a hyperscaler type deployment. Does this extend out to private data centers as well? Is that
Private data centers? I don't know that Microsoft has. Chris, can you help me out?
Well, I know that Gerald's
or on-prem, right? On-prem would be another example. Sorry.
Certainly the design of Dash is meant to be used, you know, by private data centers or even enterprise. So it's just a matter of people, you know, reusing the APIs and the stack, or even coming up with a new stack, because you'll see how we partition it into layers. It certainly has wider use than the Azure data center, and that's the hope I know from Gerald, is to make this, you know, widely embraced, just like Sonic was.
Yeah. And I'm almost done, guys, so I don't want to bore you, but this is the high-level roadmap. And so what we're working on right now, software-defined networking, SDN offloading, cloud infra, with movement toward, you know, these in the future, these services in the future. And I just took a snip here. This relates to SDN and cloud infra, and I put the link of where you could go find these specifications and requirements. But right now we're working on VNet to VNet, because we feel if we really land the APIs for VNet to VNet, everything else builds VNet to VNet. Really, it's really just a small tweak. Well, maybe not small, but just a tweak to this basic VNet to VNet service. For example, load balancer, FastPath, which is also known as load balancer. It's really an ICMP redirect, which is a small change to the code. You know, VNet peering, or global VNet peering is really translation of V4 to V6, because we in Azure use V6 to go cross region. So small things like that. We've also put service tunnel into the repo, but we're not quite finished with private link, but there's just some modification that has to happen to do that. So we present these, I'm sorry, my dog is having a little problem here. We present these in the community every Wednesday. And so, you know, we get a nice presentation from the developer working on these, and then you know, nice big Q&A. And follow-up action items and suggestions to PRs. So yeah, so we're working on these things. And the point for encryption when we get there is we just want to reuse technology that's already out there. We don't want to invent anything new. So we want to use already available, key exchange, TLS, that kind of thing. And so this is the community I run and everyone participates in. It's 9 o'clock on Wednesdays. And the other meetings, I can give you the information. These are the participators here. And if you'd like to receive meeting notes or people who might be interested, this is where you can sign up to participate in the group. And because I was having an issue with Teams, sharing the videos and things like that, I created a YouTube channel. So this is the channel, and it has 3 playlists. So the playlists are the community call, the high availability work group, and the behavioral model work group. And these can get really, really, really down in the weeds technical, or we can go super high level and talk about GitHub management. It just really depends on the week, but they definitely get down in the weeds a lot of the time. And then this is a snip of just the repo, the SonicNet Dash repo. We did, once we moved from where we were hosting over into Linux Foundation, it changed from github.com Azure Dash to SonicNet Dash. So this is where we are. This is the link. And we have a lot of people contributing. And I guess I'm still covering this too. So in the repo, we do have, Chris, was this your slide or mine?
Yes, that'll be.
Then I'm leading into introducing Chris. Any questions for me? I hope that was enough. As an intro, guys?
Yep. Thank you, Christina. It's very
Yeah.
useful.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, I'll take it from here and I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, I think you need to unshare, Christina, so I can share. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Chris Summers, and I'm a software engineer at Keysight. And I focus on new technology areas, and one of them is Dash. And I've been participating with Dash since I think one of the very first, if not the first, working group meeting. So Christina and I are kind of, I would say, cohorts at this point.
Okay.
And I attend, 3 to 5 meetings a week associated with Dash, depending on what's happening. And it's actually pretty exciting. And Keysight was actually asked by Microsoft to participate in the Dash project and help create a standardized test bed as a neutral third party, with the primary goal of, let's say, vetting the performance and conformance of vendor offerings. So since we don't make any of the Dash DPUs or IPUs or switches, we can comfortably have a kind of a neutral Switzerland approach where we say, here's a test case, here's a test bed, here's the results. And we don't have any agenda other than making all the vendors look as good as we can. That's really our approach. And we work not only in the public forum, we also work behind the scenes with vendors under NDA and we help enable them to get their platforms running and looking as and shining. That's really our goal. And so we actually do a lot of kind of advanced test engineering work with the vendors. It's almost a work in progress along with their implementation. So as far as—
May I insert something, Chris?
Please.
I think the issue we were running into is that we would be receiving a test result from supplier 1, supplier 2, supplier 3, that we couldn't really compare apples to apples with respect to connections per second or packets per second or bandwidth, whatever it was, because they were all testing something different and showing a different result, and things in the background, like, are we aging out connections? Are we using 3 packets? Are we, the different test parameters, they weren't the same. And so being able to use a company like Keysight, who are the specialists in test creation, automation, and frameworks, we were able to get the same test and explain why we want to do it, and then stress the card exactly the same way.
Thanks.
Sorry, Chris.
No, thanks for that. So I don't want to take too much time because I can go far deeper than we have time for. So I just want to cover a few things. There's really kind of two aspects. One is testing the real hardware, which my colleague Mircea will talk a bit about. And the other is the area I've been focusing on is testing the software model of Dash. One thing neat about Dash is that there's actually a P4 behavioral model to describe the overlay services. So the underlay services, the L3 routing, et cetera, that's standard Sonic. And we want to have a formal definition of the overlay services so there's no disagreement, connection tracking, VXLAN tunneling, et cetera. So it's written in P4. Now, that doesn't mean that the P4 code is needed to run on the vendor implementations. They might use a completely different technology, but P4 is also a formal description language that you can execute. So we run P4 code in a behavioral model, a simulator. It's called BMV2, Behavioral Model version 2. That's very familiar in the P4 world. And by the way, P4 workshop is next week. Hope maybe some of you will be there. And since we're integrating with Sonic, we need to have a SI or switch abstraction layer interface. And that's the generic interface to the data plane that Sonic ties into. So these SI headers are generated automatically from the P4 code, which is really neat. Traditionally, the SI headers are written manually, and now we have them actually written automatically to match the data plane model. And then we run test cases against that SI interface. These same tests can presumably be run at line rate on the real hardware. I want to talk a little bit about the stack. So Sonic is really a containerized network operating system that has a Redis database at its core. This is all the configuration and state store is in Redis. There are applications, networking applications on top that are in user space. And the switch abstraction interface is what marries it to the actual data plane. And this could be any one of the switching ASICs. All of them have SI wrappers around them. So the vendor interface, like let's say the SDK that comes with an ASIC or a DPU, is wrapped with a switch abstraction layer. And this is a uniform header. It's maintained by the Open Compute project. And for Dash, we added new services that are described this extended SI layer. And those SI headers, like I said, are generated from the P4 behavioral model. So you really have a single source of truth. And this is a super simplified diagram of how the P4 code results in a lot of artifacts, including SI headers. So these are just C header files that describe an API, and they're all just CRUD operations on, let's say, abstracted table entries, routing tables, port manager tables, VXLAN tables, ACL tables. They're just CRUD operations, create, remove, update, delete. So this P4 code ultimately, which describes, and you can actually execute this P4 code on a behavioral model. It all starts from this code. It gets transformed through some very simple code generators. And it actually generates a test harness using Thrift, which is Apache Thrift. It's a RPC mechanism similar to gRPC, which predates gRPC. We create an entire test harness from the P4 code all the way to the point where we can test the behavioral model. And we can also replace this with vendor hardware and occupies the same place, a Thrift interface to vendor hardware that can be tested against hardware traffic generators. I'll pause for a moment because I've just used a lot of word salad and I want to give people a chance to ask questions, if any. Okay, I'll continue. So right now we have the behavioral model V2, which is really like a simulation engine. It's written in C++. It takes in the compiled P4 code and it can execute a few hundred packets per second. It's really a great simulator. It's used in education and simulation a lot. But there's also an effort to use Intel's work. Intel's been working on a P4 DPDK package. At least 2018 is the first time I heard of it at a DPDK conference. And it's very mature and it's getting to the point where we're going to be pretty soon running the Dash code on this execution engine, which will be very performant. I expect hundreds of thousands, if not millions of packets per second. So we're getting pretty close. Right now in our CI pipeline, we compile the code to this backend. We just don't have it executing yet. That's a work in progress while some gaps are closed. So we'll actually have a way to run the Dash code at a very high rate simulation. And I want to just go to the next level of complexity. And I won't walk through this diagram, I promise. The point is, this is what the actual workflow looks like when you compile a P4 code. There's a whole bunch of Docker containers that build all the artifacts and then execute the simulation model here. And the point I want to make, which I think relates to the OPI group, is that I guess my opinion is when you get onto GitHub and you try something new, developers are impatient and busy, and we have high expectations. I like to think of 5 minutes time to first dopamine. I don't know if anyone's heard that expression, but what it means is when you try something new on GitHub, you want to feel some kind of sense of accomplishment or progress within 5 minutes, or you start wondering, what am I doing here? So we really strove to do that with Dash, and we worked very hard to optimize this whole workflow. So you can clone the repo and type these commands, and in a few minutes, you've got a simulation and the test cases running. And what we did is we pre-built a lot of Docker base layers, which are up in Azure Container Registry. So when you run this, most of everything is already pre-built, and you only have to build a little bit locally in your work environment. You can literally have this up and running in a few minutes. And we run this whole pipeline in the CI Git runner, GitHub Actions, as being alluded to earlier in the meeting. Those are running. So when someone commits new P4 code, or you do a pull request, this whole thing runs automatically in a few minutes, and it runs all the test cases. So we have continuous integration. And so that's what I wanted to convey. I'd say that message is how we've really worked hard to make this a smooth developer experience. So this is from the simulation point of view. When we have P4 code, which describes the pipeline, we hash that out in our behavioral model meeting to make sure all the players agree on the model, and then vendors implement that in their own way on their hardware. It might be P4, might be a combination of P4 and ARM code, it might be a sea of MIPS processors. It doesn't really matter. The P4 describes the behavior at a high level, and we all agree on what it should do. And once again, going to this diagram here, the switch abstraction interface is the key to integrating with Sonic. Any Sonic stack can integrate with the Psi layer. So if you wrap your implementation in Psi, it can integrate with Sonic. You could consider this somewhat analogous to OPI submissions, having standard APIs. So I'm going to pause and give my colleague Mircea the floor. If there's any questions about what I just presented, feel free to ask, or we can always talk offline if you want to learn more.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Mircea. I've been presenting in OPI probably about the lab use cases, and also some POC group in OPI API work group. And I'm also part of Dash. And in Dash, when we talk about testing, we have the pre-silicon testing, what Chris just talked about, where we want to validate that the behavior model and the functionality it's there. My focus has been mostly at this time on the scale requirements for Dash. It's called Hero Test, where we are trying to test millions of connections per second and throughput and packets per second for the ASICs, once the ASICs are available from each vendor. And for that, we have like a huge test bed with multiple layer 4.7 traffic generators and layer 2.3 traffic generators to create all kinds of traffic, active connection, background traffic, and so on. And there is also another portion of the testing once the ASICs are being deployed into the cloud. It can be Azure, but I don't know, from a slide before, it's Alibaba also joined, and I think there will be multiple others that will adopt Dash. We want to be able to test and validate the same use cases in the production environment. Now going to the hero test, the ASIC validation, we actually saw some of that at a much lower scale in the first OPI POCs that I have done here for data center use case. So I took the learnings from Dash and using the OPI API's proposals, not the Dash API, but OPI API, we have a demo done for that as well. With a use case running, it was an Pensando DPU at that time. So that's all from my side.
So if I could say, Murcha works with each of the technology providers and actually has created recorded presentations to provide to them, to us, and it is an apples to apples comparison. It's really, really amazing work.
I'll just switch the screen to show just the scale of the testing. It's pretty large. It takes a lot of hardware test equipment to slam a DPU with this much traffic and test it at precision rates.
Especially with the precision of, like you talk about, Murcha, the aging, the swapping, the running it for how many seconds, a minute at a time, or whatever it is, whatever the hero test requirements are.
Yeah, so the traffic, I mean, we let it run even for 15 minutes or even more, even if
And
the
we get no
requirements are
drops.
for just a few minutes. Yes, to validate, no drops. Flows expire very fast just to add stress on the ASIC itself. So it's focused around the lab testing. And regarding the APIs, while Dash is being developed, each vendor has their own internal APIs as well. That are then being, generalized into Dash APIs. So we have been working with those as well to be able to run the test and validate the ASIC before Dash API is being finalized.
What's cool though is we get access to the latest and greatest technology as it's coming off the line, both Keysight and me.
And
go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
No, that's great. Just to wrap things up, here's some links if people are interested. And I usually attend the OPI API meetings too. So you can always get a hold of me if you want to learn more, or get involved. You can subscribe to these mailing lists.
And I put my email in the chat window if you want specific information on how to join the groups or the YouTube channel, or invitations to the meetings. Just let me know.
Well, thanks for giving us the time slot, OPI committee.
Any questions?
No, just reiterating the thank you for presenting and educating us a bit on Dash and how Microsoft and Keysight are using it. So we can think about how that might fit into OPI.
Yeah.
Besides the use case of the data center, will be interesting to look at Dash also how it solves some of the problems that OPI is trying to solve as well. For example, the ASIC itself may run ONI, and then that will bootstrap an image. I think OPI is having similar questions about how we're going to load the image into the DPU itself, being based on Sonic and having the containerized environment across all the ASICs, all the DPUs. That's again something that OPI may be interested in, and have the similar environment with containerized applications running on top of DPU. So I think more in-depth look can be have to see similarities and things that can be, I don't know, cross-use or something of this sort.
Yeah, but I just thought of something. Also, the fact that Dash APIs are defined at the SI layer, and Sonic is married to that for the Azure use case, but there are other operating systems that are starting to use SI as well. So the applicability can be much wider. And just this week at the OCP Regional Summit in Prague, they announced that the Dent operating system, which is being promoted more by Amazon and for the enterprise case, is adopting Psi. Also, FBOSS, Facebook uses Psi for their switches now. So by defining Dash at the Psi layer, it really makes it broadly applicable. It could even fit into the OPI somehow. So I think we're out of time, but thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for calling time for me, Chris. It is time.
Yeah.
So,
I
thanks,
appreciate the
everybody.
opportunity to talk to you guys. Thank you.
All right, and I think
Thank you much.
that's a wrap for everybody. Thanks for showing up.
Okay.
Thank you, Christina.
Okay, thanks. Hope to see you in person sometime, guys. Bye.
Right.